In today's lab, what we're going to be doing is setting up a snort installation. We're going to be using snort on our Ubuntu machine. It can be installed on Windows as well, but it actually did come originally from Linux. So we're just going to do a basic snort installation. I'm going to use my Ubuntu machine to run snort, which is an intrusion detection software. So it's called an IDS, intrusion detection system. And anytime a threat is detected, it will notify you that someone's trying to hack you. I'm also going to be using my Windows 7 machine, and the Windows 7 machine is going to be basically doing a port scan against the Ubuntu machine. So that's going to be the way we're going to do it. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of how snort works and what it does. So it is an IDS, and it will detect an intrusion. So the way it works is basically snort is a packet sniffer that's going to be capturing packets. And it works like antivirus in a way, where it will take a look at a specific packet. It will match that against rules and determine if this sequence of bits basically is a threat or not. So it'll look against a dictionary of known threats, and if it matches maybe a port scan, it'll then identify it and notify you that a threat is in play. So there's different ways you can set up snort. Basically, the snort installation is what's called a sensor. So you can place different snort sensors or different installations in different segments of your network. So one strategy is configuring your switch. So if this was going to be a standalone machine running snort, I would just mirror all the traffic to the snort server, and then that same traffic would be going to the workstation or the web server or the database server. So that way, like for example, your web server isn't going to be taxed by doing basically like an antivirus scan on it all the time. So it's a way of offloading any of the IDS work onto a separate machine, and it won't affect your web server or your database server or anything like that. This is probably the best way of doing a snort installation, but it is more complicated. And what we're going to be doing is we're just going to set up that snort installation right on our machine. There's also things called appliances that you can buy, which are just physical hardware devices, and you can plug them into your network. A lot of large corporations will do that. They'll buy an application as a hardware device and just plug it into the network, and then let that notify them when an intrusion is happening. But we're going to do it on the cheap, and we're going to do it this way. So when you're placing it on your network, a lot of networks have different segments. They use VLANs or virtual LANs. And for example, here at the college, there's different IP address schemes for different virtual LANs. So for example, all the students within the computer lab, they're on their own VLAN, which is completely separate from instructors as well as administration. You know, there's different VLANs for different groups of people. And even like web servers, they're broken onto their own VLAN. And then the switch is configured with rules, so that way if you want to maybe make an update to a web server, you'd actually have to VPN into that specific VLAN. So basically students don't have the ability to port scan database servers or web servers. So it's just a way of creating different segments upon your network, so that way you're keeping certain assets secured. When you're dealing with snort sensors or snort installations, they call them sensors because you can place them in different areas on different segments of network. So here at the college, we may have 4 or 5 different snort installations running on different VLANs, just monitoring what's going on those VLANs. So if somebody is doing maybe some type of attack or doing some type of flood, it will be identified that a denial of service is happening, and then it can then be reported to the appropriate people. So how it gets reported, there's different ways that it can get done. This guide here is from the Ubuntu community. It's the Snort IDS guide, and it's dated. It's a little bit out of date. Snort actually stops supporting direct insertion into MySQL, so we won't be using the guide. But I thought it's got a couple really good configuration pictures here designing how to do it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go off on our own and just open up our terminal. So I'm just going to go to my terminal. And I'm going to just install Snort how I install most software by using apt-get. So I'm just going to start out by doing a sudo, and I'm going to do an apt-get install, and I'm just going to use Snort. Password's password. And it's going to find some prerequisites. I'm going to say yes. And I'm just going to let it install Snort for me. So it first is asking us for an IP address scheme. So we could do a whole subnet if we wanted to. Or if we wanted to, we could use our own IP address. So what I'm going to do is I'm just opening up a second terminal. So I went over to my dash home, clicked on terminal, and I want to get my IP address. So I'm just going to do an if config. And the if config is showing me that my IP address is 145. I've got ETH0, so it's my first Ethernet adapter, and my IP address is 10.7.66.145. So I'm just going to remember that. If I can't, I'll write it down, but I'm just going to change this to be a 10.7.66.145. And instead of doing a -16, I'm going to do a -24 because I've got a block of 255, 255.255.255.0 is going to be subnet mask 24. So I'm just going to hit my tab to get down to the OK, and I'm going to press enter. So my IP address /24, hit enter. Just going to let it do that installation for me. Okay, so at this point, we did get Snort installed. It's a bare bones Snort installation. So what I want to do is I just want to reconfigure it. So when I reconfigure it, I want it to email me basically when an intrusion happens. Now, it's not going to really email me here at the college because we do have certain policies in place preventing outbound email. So it's not really going to work, but I want to show you how to do it because in the real world, this would probably be what I would do. I'd want to be emailed if somebody's hacking me. So even though it won't work, it really would work if we weren't trying to email from inside the college. And basically, the college just has policies in place that prevent that because people may try to spam and they don't want the college to be blacklisted, or some student may come in with a virus on their computer that is spamming, and so we can't do it, but this is how we would do it if we were going to. So I'm going to use sudo, and I'm going to do the dpkg reconfig. So I'm going to do a package reconfigure on Snort. Hit enter. So it's stopping it, it's starting it. So basically we can set it. How do we want it to start? We want it to start automatically on boot. So I'm just going to hit tab and say OK. And this is just information. saying that it's normally ETH0. I'm just going to say OK. And it is ETH0 because before we did that if config, and I did see that it was running on the ETH0, which made sense. IP address, where IP address is 145, and that's the same thing, so that's good. So at this point, it's asking if it should disable promiscuous mode, and we want to leave that enabled, so we do not want to disable it. So I'm going to leave the no, and basically that's going to allow us to do this snort analyzing of packets. I don't have any additional options that I can think of at this point, so I'm just going to say OK. And basically daily summary, should they be sent. So a cron job, cron is like a service that runs, and basically it can run to set up the summary of logs to a selected email address. And I'm just going to say yes. So this is where I would do that. And the email address would be, now in the real world I'd use my real email. But you'd put in your real email. This doesn't matter because it's not actually going to function correctly. But if it was, our email would go in there. And minimum amount of alerts in order to flag you as needing to send an email. I'm going to leave that as 1. So if one attack happens, then it will send that email out. Okay, so we're all set up. If you go to the Snort website, you can keep your rules up to date. So I'm just going to Google Snort here, and it's snort.org. So if you wanted to install this on a Windows machine, you could download. Rules. They've got community rules. They also have the ability to sign in as a member and then get basically more up-to-date rules. So you can definitely do that if you want. I'm just going to go with the default rule set that we currently have. Okay, so now that we've got Snort already installed and configured to send out emails, that's great. But what I want to do is I want to run Snort in the console, so that way as intrusions are happening, we can see any attempt being written out to the actual terminal window. So I want to just see the output, so that way I know that it's actually working. In the real world, I probably wouldn't really do it that way. I would want some type of an automated response. The files are getting created by Snort, so it's creating like log files. That's what gets emailed to us when an attempt actually happens. But what I want to do is I want to use just the terminal window so we can test it. In the real world, if you weren't looking at the terminal, you may miss that attempt. So what I'm going to do is I want to start the process by actually stopping the Snort service. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my terminal and I'm just going to do a sudo, and the Snort service is going to be running in the etc init.d and then snort, and then I'm just going to say stop. So this is going to stop the Snort service. Password's password. Okay, so Snort currently is not running. So what I can do at this point, now that it's not running, is I'm just going to start it up. I'm going to do another sudo, and I'm going to do snort. And what I want to do is I want to specify a -a, and that's going to be the different action. There's a bunch of them, like the fast log and the default. But what I'm going to do is console. And then I want to do a -h. So it was a capital A, lowercase h, and then the h is going to be the host. So my host is my 10.7.66 dot 145 / 24, and then I want to do a dash C, and then the C is going to be my configuration. So my config files are held inside the / etc / snort / snort dot config. So I'm just going to double check what I've got here. I've got sudo snort space -a, and that's going to go to my console -h, which is going to be my host, which is my 10.7.66.145, and this is the machine I'm trying to protect, / 24. And then I've got my -c, which is my config file, / etc / snort / snort.config. Oh, it's not config, it's conf. C-O-N-F. There we go. So at this point, it's loading up all the rules. It's basically running. And anytime it sees something, it's going to detect it to the screen. So now that this is up and going, what I want to do is I'm going to also start up my Windows 7 machine. I'm going to open up my Windows 7. Okay, so I've got my Windows 7 here. So I can see it's already logging different events. So it's detecting a network scan. So somebody actually is already doing port scans here. It's a PNP scan. So interesting. So that's actually detecting a scan before I'm even here. So somebody's scanning the network as I'm doing the lab. So I'm going to do a 10.7.66.145. So this just helps reinforce the fact why I never trust public networks. People are sitting on a public network with nothing but time on their hands, and they're going to do whatever they can. Okay, so I'm just going to run my scan. So I'm actually doing an Xmas scan. Alright, so already here I can see that I've got, so it's saying 150 it's detecting, so I'm just going to quick see what my IP address. I'm going to do an IP config. Yeah, so that's me. I'm 150. So it's coming over here and it's getting the information. And over here this is detecting, so I see my Xmas scans happening, an echo, replay, a ping. So any type of activity is just getting written out to the screen. In the real world, this activity gets written out to a log file. And email is one way of dealing with it. Otherwise, there are third-party tools that pull from that. I know a lot of people write applications that will pull from that and create pretty graphs and charts and stuff like that. But I'm just trying to at least get across the idea of what an IDS is and what intrusion detection is. And there's a lot of other third-party software applications that people use. SolarWinds College uses that, lets them know when a router goes down or if something is happening on the network. Any type of congestion issues or servers are under attack or going down. So anyways, hopefully you found this tutorial helpful. And this is intrusion detection. Thanks.